Welcome back to another News of the Week episode. So remember back in last September when Inter Miami was able to acquire Blaise Matudi on a TAM deal and how everybody said that that deal was an absolute steal, and even myself said that this deal looks too good to be true considering they literally just acquired a guy that was considered one of the best holding midfielder in the world and a French World Cup winner and playing at one of the best team in the world, that is Juventus, and they literally got him only on a TAM deal. Well, it seemed like these last couple of days, MLS kind of had that same thought point that I had back in September, because now they are launching an investigation to see whether or not if Inter Miami did breach some rule in order to get Blaise Matuidi only on a TAM deal. And I believe this is actually the first time the league decided to do this, and it's kind of quite fitting that the first time they decided to do this, it happened to Inter Miami, because lawsuit and legal battle seems to be a new nickname for Inter Miami, knowing what they have been going through for these past couple of years. And also, I'm kind of surprised not a lot of teams have even got caught by doing some illegal TAM deal in order to acquire a player, or even breaching some rule in order to get a player on a TAM deal instead of on a DP contract. Because when you look at the rules in terms of how teams are able to sign guys on a TAM deal or even on a DP contract, it is very, very complicated, and some of these rules I don't even understand and whatsoever. And I also won't be surprised that in the past maybe the league had decided to let a couple of teams slide and gave them some free pass in terms of maybe finding a loophole in order to sign a guy only on a TAM deal instead on a DP contract. I think a great example of this is what happened a couple of years ago with the Galaxy, where remember when they decided to sign Christian Pavone only on a TAM deal and on loan with Boca Junior, and how everybody was absolutely fuming that they were able to do so, because it was pretty clear that there was no way the Galaxy was able to get Pavone on a TAM deal, and that they somehow will have to sacrifice one of their DP player, because they pretty much had all three of their DP lot filled. And yet somehow in some way, I know there's a lot of people that pretty much think that this is another example the league decided to give the Galaxy a free pass and the benefit of the doubt, and therefore that deal of course went through. But that being said, going back to this, I don't know whether or not if Inter Miami is going to get caught, and whether or not if this investigation does lead to Inter Miami potentially getting punished. And if they do get punished for this, what exactly is the punishment going to be? Is it going to be a loss of draft pick, which I don't think Inter Miami won't mind if that's the punishment, knowing the fact that draft picks or losing a couple of draft pick doesn't hurt as much as what other team in the other American league like the NFL or NBA, that it seems like kind of a severe punishment, knowing the fact that MLS in terms of the super draft is not as relevant as the other draft that is going on around the other league. But I'm assuming most likely it's going to be a loss of general allocation money, or even TAM money that Inter Miami is going to have to lose, because of the fact that if they do get find out for this, that of course is going to be the consequences. So yeah, we shall see whether or not if that's going to be the case, and if there's going to be any more update in terms of this. But moving on in terms of the next news and talk about signings that happened in the past couple of days. Well, the Galaxy have signed Irish international defender Derek Williams from Blackburn Rovers, and this is clearly a signing that they decided to get, to hope that maybe this is finally the player that can fit into our center back part, and can finally be a guy that stabilizes our defense. I mean, when you look at this Galaxy backline, it's been kind of a revolving door for the past couple of years, with the way that they signed so many defender and hope that they can finally stabilize their defense. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out. So now they kind of decided to look at this championship level of a player, and that they hope that maybe this is going to be the guy to fix the issue. We shall see whether or not if that is going to be the case. And I don't know, even though he's an Irish international defender, I'm not quite sure if he's a regular with the Ireland national team. And also playing with Blackburn Rovers, they're kind of a mid-table team in the championship, and I know the championship in terms of the quality, it's a little bit better than MLS, but that doesn't mean when we see see players that come from the championship and come to MLS, which not a lot of players actually does that. Not all of them tends to be amazing player once they come to the league, but I'm pretty sure the Galaxy are really hoping that that is not the case, and hope that this guy is finally the answer to stabilize their back line, which has been the biggest problem that this team has been dealing with for the past couple of seasons. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news involving the Seattle Sounders, who has officially re-signed Fredy Montero off of free agency. So I kind of mentioned this in my last News of the Week episode, where I think of all the signings that the Sounders have done, which are usually players that either used to be based in Seattle or players that used to play for the club, this feels like it's the ultimate reunion, considering the fact that Fredy Montero is a player that's been with this Sounders team and was part of this Sounders team when they came into the league back in 2009, and that he is still the all-time leading goal scorer for this team. Now, there's no doubt that with him coming back to the Sounders, I don't think he's going to be a regular starter like he was in his first stint back in 2009 and in 2010. But if he is going to be a starter, most likely I would think the Sounders are going to go with two striker up front, or maybe Montero will be shifted into the wing spot and maybe take the role of Jordan Morris, and that the Sounders would feel like maybe he is going to be a temporary replacement for Jordan Morris, who unfortunately is out for this season. But that being said, overall I think Sounders fans are happy about this signing. Not just the fact that they now have more depth in the attack, but this is kind of a nostalgia kind of signing, bringing a guy that means so much to this team, and certainly consider one of the best player that the Sounders had in their early days of MLS, and that really the thing that will beat this in terms of the ultimate reunion and the ultimate nostalgia, that the Sounders decided to acquire a player that used to play for them early in their MLS days, is bring back Ozzie Alonso. But unfortunately, that is not going to happen, at least maybe till next off season, because Minnesota has been able to re-sign Ozzie Alonso to a new contract. And despite the fact that I know this has been one of the big questions that the Loons has been looking to see whether or not if they are going to keep Ozzie Alonso, or maybe Ozzie decided that this might be the year where he decided to hang up his boots. I don't think there was a lot of doubt that he wasn't going to return to Minnesota, knowing the fact that I've heard reports saying that he's going to accept a front office role once he decided to hang up his boots. Well, it seemed like now the only question is whether or not if he is going to be going into the front office, or the fact that he's going to play another year, and that it seemed like he is going to be playing another year, and that it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if this indeed is going to be the final year for Ozzie Alonso. I'm assuming it could be, if he is going to have those injury setback that really plague him last season, and that if he does announce his retirement, there's no doubt that I am going to do a video and do a career overlook of Ozzie Alonso, because he is considered one of the best holding midfielder in league history, and definitely deserve a video to talk about that. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, and actually talk about guys that also got a contract extension, because there was also a couple of guys that of course were able to be re-signed by their respective club, but I'm just going to keep it simple and just name all these players. So you got Sam Vines and Diego Rubio both getting re-signed with Colorado this week, followed by James Sands, who got re-signed with NYCFC, and Joe Bendick, of course, re-signed with the Union for these past couple of days. And overall, all these contract extension pretty much make sense. I think the only one that maybe kind of doesn't make sense, and I'm maybe a little bit surprised, is Diego Rubio re-signing with the Colorado Rapids, because there was kind of rumbling saying that he might not be part of this team, and that the Rapids might let him go after just such a terrible season that he had last year. But I think they feel like he could maybe bounce back heading into this season. And also, when you look at what the Rapids have been doing this offseason, they have re-signed a lot of their main core and a lot of their players from last season to a contract extension, and they feel like batch of core that they have is going to be good enough to not just push for the playoffs, but maybe could be competing for MLS Cup in the future. So yeah, Rubio returning to the Rapids. We'll see whether or not if he can have a bounce back year heading into next season or heading into this upcoming season. But moving on, in terms of the next news, involved the Red Bulls, who have signed U.S. Youth International Cameron Harper from Celtic. This one isn't really a big surprise because we've been talking about how the Red Bulls were pretty close to sign this guy on the deal, and that it was just a matter of time before they, of course, announced it, which they decided to do in these last couple of days. And Cameron Harper, he's a 19-year-old kid who hasn't really got a lot of playing time with Celtic, and that it seems like now he's going to try to go back to the U.S. and maybe trying to get more game time with the Red Bulls so he can make the jump back to Europe. And that I think it's great the fact that he is going to be going to the Red Bulls to kind of prove himself that he can definitely make the jump back to Europe and maybe get game time for a European club, because clearly he wasn't getting time with Celtic, and that the Red Bulls is one of those teams that has a good history in terms of developing young players, and especially young talented player that has raw abilities and eventually transition to them into a decent kind of player and could and a player that would eventually fulfill their potential. So yeah, we shall see whether or not if Cameron Harper is gonna get more playing time, and whether or not in these next couple of years eventually he is going to be sold back to Europe and maybe get more game time with another European club, or maybe even going back to Celtic once his time with the Red Bulls is going to be done. Now, moving on in terms of the next news, and now talk about transfer rumors. And there wasn't really a lot of transfer rumors that happened in these past couple of days, but certainly the biggest transfer talk right now in MLS involving Rafael Santos Borré, where last week I talked about how there were a couple of clubs now are interested in him besides TFC. But it seems like TFC not only are the leading candidate to potentially get Rafael Santos Borré, but they are right now splashing the cash in order to get him, and they are report to splash $15 million in order to sign the River Plate striker. Now, I also said before that, when I first heard about this rumor, I knew that TFC was probably going to pay a hefty amount to get him, mainly because, besides those MLS clubs that I mentioned that are also trying to get him, but there's also a club in Brazil called Palmeiras, and a very successful kind of club in Brazil that is also looking for a service of him and looking to try to acquire him from River Plate. So I have a feeling TFC was going to have to spend some big buck. And $15 million that they of course spend, I think is kind of right around the range that I think they could potentially acquire him. I know it sounds like a very big fee, but that's what happened when you are looking to try to get one of the main striker and one of the better player that is coming out of South America. Now, that being said, if River Plate decided to say no to this deal, do TFC decide to go even higher and maybe even break the transfer record in MLS in terms of signing a player for the most amount of money? Because as much as I know TFC is a team that has history of trying of getting players for a ridiculous amount of money, and this is also one of the most optimistic team and one of the team that's not afraid to splash the cash, it just gets to a point where it might be too much in terms of just spending on one specific player. And I know this is also a player that I said before that he could be potentially a Jozy Altidore replacement, but people forget that TFC technically in terms of the number 9 position, they don't really need to worry about that position because they already have Iowa Quinola, who I know he kind of had a breakout year last season, and there's still question whether or not if he can continue that heading into his second season. But still, they kind of already have an option in terms of that. And sure, maybe this will be kind of like a good secure safety blanket and maybe a way that he could be definitely be a guy that if he does come to MLS, he's going to really be one, if not the best player in the league. But when you spend that much money on a player like that, you better hope that of course is the case, because if you spend that much money on a player, or you decided to kind of did the mistake that Atlanta did a couple of years ago, getting Pity Martinez for a large amount of money, and he turns out to pretty much be a huge flop once he comes to MLS. Yeah, that's definitely not going to be very good, and it could definitely hamper maybe some future signings. So yeah, it will be very interesting to see, not only if TFC potentially is going to get this guy, but if River Plate decide to ask even for more money, is Toronto going to try to maybe match that deal and really trying to break the record for the most expensive acquisition that we have seen in league history. Now, another Canadian club that has been reported signing a player is the Vancouver Whitecaps, who is reported to be close in signing Botafogo midfielder Kai Alexandra. Now, this is a signing that I also think is going to pretty much be announced in these next couple of days, because this is a player that Vancouver pretty much has been negotiating with Botafogo throughout this entire offseason and looking to trying to acquire him. So yeah, I think it's just going to be a matter of time before this deal is going to be official, and I think he's going to be a decent player from what I heard of him in South America, and that it can definitely booster that defensive midfield that the Whitecaps had. However, it's pretty clear that despite the fact that they might get a decent player that can booster their holding midfield and their defensive midfield spot, the one position that they still need to sign in, and a position that they've been desperate in terms of trying to get, is the number 10 position. And when you look at this team, and that if this is going to be a team that is looking to go to stage 2 of the rebuild and trying to maybe compete for those playoff spots, they definitely need a number 10 player, and they definitely need to spend that DP amount of money to get that number 10. Now, they have tried to do that during this off season, but unfortunately it hasn't resort into anything. But like, as I said, if they want to be competitive, and if they want to be even better than last season, where they were so close from making the playoffs, they definitely need that DP type of number 10 in their roster. Now, moving on into the next news, and now moving away from talk about transfer rumors and signings, is that Toronto has announced that they are going to be playing their home game in Orlando and Tampa for the start of the MLS season. So in some way, Toronto is kind of following the footstep of the Raptors, where they decided to play their home games in Tampa. And that, I know this is probably going to be something that is just temporary, and obviously, like, for these Canadian team, they're hoping that it is definitely temporary, because as they're really hoping that eventually the Canadian government will give the okay sign that they can open borders right now, and that they can of course play in their home market. But as of now, TFC alongside with Vancouver and Montreal will have to play at neutral venue, just like they did last season. And with Vancouver, I heard there's rumors that there potentially is going to be playing in Utah, and they're going to be ground sharing with RSL at Rio Tinto to play their home games. I haven't heard anything about Montreal yet, but once we do get the news of where exactly these three Canadian teams are going to be playing their home game here in the States, we're going to get a closer answer of when exactly the schedule is going to be released. Because I really think the reason why the schedule has been delayed for so long is because of the fact that they still have no idea where these Canadian team is going to be playing, and that once they do find the answer, then they can definitely start making the schedule, and that we're going to eventually find the answer of when exactly the schedule is going to be released. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, involve Ike Opara, and for once, there was actually some update in terms of the situation with Ike Opara, as there is actually reports saying that Minnesota is saying that they're going to be now shifting his timeline from potentially coming back to the team for this upcoming season to now not likely that he is going to be coming back to Minnesota. And the whole Iko Para situation is still a big mystery that we probably would never know unless the team decided to really they give the answer, or maybe if Iko Para decided to open up and say what is going on with him. I mean, I know there's been reports saying that his undisclosed injury that he's been suffering might have been a concussion, but we don't know if that, of course, is the case. And if it is indeed a concussion, this is a big decision that Iko Para is going to have to make about his future, because concussion is an injury that unlike most injury that players have to deal with throughout their career, is an injury that can definitely affect your life. And if you're Iko Para and if you have this kind of serious concussion that is bothering you, do you decide to take a risk and come back to continue your career, or you might as well just kind of call it a career, because you don't want to go back and potentially take even more risk in the concussion that you are suffering. But yeah, I mean, that is definitely a huge decision that he's going to make. Like, from what I heard about this news, where he most likely is not going to come back, like, the longer this is going to take, the more I feel like most likely Iko Para would never play for Minnesota, and he eventually is going to announce that he is gonna retire. And yeah, I mean, if that, of course, is the case, it's definitely a very sad way to see such a great player to unfortunately hang up his boot, and pretty much had to call his career early because of the injuries that he's been dealing with. But let's just hope, fingers crossed, that of course is not going to be the case, and hopefully there's a glimmer of hope that Iko Para could potentially come back to this team. But as I said before, if it is a concussion issue that he's been dealing with, I have no problem whatsoever if he says that he's not going to play again, because again, concussion is a very serious matter, and it's a matter that we still haven't really had a full understanding of how severe it can affect a player, not just in their career, but also after, when their career is done, and how can that affect for them for the rest of their life. Now, moving on in terms of the next news, and we actually do have a player that actually announced his retirement in these last couple of days, and that player is Ray Gaddis, who announced that he is going to be retiring, and he's not going to be coming back to the Philadelphia Union. And this is definitely a very surprising move that Ray Gaddis decided to hang up his boots. I mean, I know he's 31 years old, and usually fullbacks, they usually don't have a long career in the professional game compared to any other outfield position. But still, looking how Ray Gaddis was last season with the Union, I thought he played probably his best soccer throughout his career, and the fact that he decided to kind of announce his retirement right now definitely kind of surprised a lot of people, and definitely surprised a lot of Union fans that this was the time to pretty much pull the plug. And now, with the Union, we know that this offseason they have lost a lot of key players that was part of that Supporters Shield run, although for good reason, because they did get a huge sum of money that they were able to acquire after they sold those players to Europe. But the thing is, they haven't used that money to basically replace some of these guys, and they kind of trust that these next batch of talent that they have coming out of their academy will be even better than the player that they have. Well, that's one thing, but now with Ray Gaddis, who, I think before when we realized he was going to retire, I don't think they realized that he was going to retire, and that he was pretty much part of their plan. So there's now going to be a huge alter plan, and now going to be even a bigger question of the fact that, we better spend that money that we invest in guys like Brendan Aronson and Mark McKenzie to potentially find a replacement for Ray Gaddis, because we did not expect him to potentially be a player that was not going to be part of our team heading into this upcoming season. And, with me talking about how they lost all these key players, you wonder, is this going to be a setback for them next year, where they're not going to be that Supporters Shield kind of team like they were last season, and that they will still be good enough to make the playoffs, but are they going to be good enough to to be an MLS Cup contender heading in the Eastern Conference. But now moving on into the last news of this News of the Week involving California, who has finally announced that they are allowing fans back in the stands, and that they're going to be allowing fans back in the stands in the beginning of the MLS season. Actually, they said that they're going to start allowing fans back in the stands as soon as April 1st, and they're going to be allowing all the baseball team in California to have fans during opening day of the MLB season. But yeah, this is definitely great news to hear that this has finally happened. This is something that a couple of weeks ago I didn't think it was going to happen, because California, they probably had the most strictest rule and the strictest protocol in terms of how to reopen and how to continue to kind of limit or even not allow some of these certain things that is going on because of COVID. But it's great news, the fact that I'm hearing that they are allowing fans back. And also, for those that wonder how are they going to allow fans back and how the limited capacity is going to work, well, it's going to be basically based on the color tier, where if it's a purple tier, which is widespread, they might only allow 100 fans or even no fans in the stands. But if a county is going to be on a red tier, they're going to allow 20% capacity. And if a county is going to be in a moderate or even a yellow tier, they might allow 50% capacity in the stadium. And the other thing that I also want to talk about is that, just because California says that they allow fans to be back in the stands, there is still one obstacle that I am kind of worried that it could prevent fans from going back in the stands. And this is actually mostly for me and my chances of potentially going to watch the Quakes in the first game of this upcoming season, and that is, what exactly is the county going to do, and whether or not if the county is going to follow suit with what the states are saying, that they're going to allow fans back in the stands. And I won't be surprised if the state says that they're allow fans to be back in the stands, and that the county and especially Santa Clara County are just going to say, nope, we're not going to allow fans back in the stand. We don't care what the state said. This is basically how it is. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be pissed off not only a lot of Quakes fans, but once again pissed off a lot of people that is in Santa Clara County. So yeah, that's one thing that I am a little bit concerned about. How we'll see how if the county are going to follow the same rules as what the states is going to do. I believe the county doesn't have to follow the same rule as what the states do. They do have the rights to basically set that we're not going to follow what the state says, and we're going to set our own rules of how things are going to go. But let's just hope that for people like myself that really wants to go back to sporting venue to watch our favorite team play, that the county doesn't do that and doesn't really want to play hardball again with the fans. But either way, that is pretty much it for this week's News of the Week episode. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all these news, and as always, if there's any news that I didn't mention, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.